Yo, what up guys? In today's video, I'll be talking about 6 fighters to look out for this year in 2026. Before we get started, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, but let's get right into it. So starting off with number 6, we have Quillin Salkeld. Quillin is currently 4-0 in the UFC, with one of those fights being in the Dana White Contender Series. And honestly, he's a really tall fighter for the lightweight division, so he has a big advantage with the reach and the height. And in his last 3 fights, he really showed us a lot on what he could do and what type of fighter he is. If we go back to his UFC debut versus Jubilee, he knocked him out in 19 seconds for his debut. And look, I understand that Jubilee isn't the best fighter. This is really his first fight in the UFC, but at least in that we could see the knockout power that he has and how quick he could finish a fight. And in his second fight in the UFC versus Yanal Al-Shmuz, he honestly really showed a lot in this fight, just because it went full 3 rounds. And not only did he show you in that fight how good his striking is, but in this fight, he also showed how good he could mix it up with the good takedowns that he landed against him. And in the fight, he attempted 23 takedowns and he only landed 8. Which is kind of crazy, but I think in this fight that he really tried to prove a point that not only his striking is really good and the knockout power he has, but also how good his grappling is. And in that same fight against Shmuz, in the 3rd round, Quillin gets clipped pretty bad, but he managed to still fight on through that and was able to get a takedown successfully. So to me, it showed that he has a chin and he's not scared to get dropped, like he's there to fight. Just because I've seen multiple fighters get dropped by a jab. So in a really bad situation, I do think that Quillin did the right thing for taking him down. So at least I could see that he has good fight IQ in situations like that. But in his last fight against a talented, experienced Nasrat, he managed to put him to sleep in the 1st round with a nasty head kick. And I do think this was a big step up for Quillin in competition, because Nasrat fought fighters like Dan Hooker, Jared Gordon, Esteban Brivovic. So for Quillin to go out there and knock him out in the 1st round the way he did with a nasty head kick just goes to show how much potential he has in this division. And I get that Nasrat might not be the top 10 fighter, but that's still really impressive to do against a guy like that who's been in the UFC for a while. So I could definitely see Quillin Salkeld get to that top 10 in the rankings in the lightweight division by the end of the year if he stays active. And from the interviews that I watched, that he does want to stay active. So from what I remember, Nasrat was ranked 15 at the time. So there's a chance that he can crack that top 10. It sounds crazy for just getting into the UFC and in the lightweight division. But like I said, if he stays active, there's a really good chance he does get to that top 10. And from the news that I've been seeing is that he was supposed to fight on that Australian card, the one with Diego Lopez versus Volkanovski on January 31st. But I saw that his opponent pulled out because of an injury, so I'm not sure on who he's fighting, so hopefully somebody good. Next up at 5, we have Loner Kavanaugh. He is currently 3-1 in the UFC, and on his Contender Series fight against Antoine Ho, he showed his power as a 125er, which is really impressive because there's a lot of 125ers that don't have the knockout power. And from what I've been seeing since the Contender Series and some of the Cage Warriors matches, he is mainly just a striker and a sniper. And if we look at the flyweight division, there really isn't big wrestlers or grapplers besides Pantoja, Tatsuro Taira, and Brandon Moreno that could give him a big challenge later down in his career. Although in his last fight, it ended in a loss and was knocked out by Charles Johnson, I do think Charles Johnson just has more experience than Loner, and that's why he won the fight. But the loss against Charles Johnson is valid, only because Charles Johnson did knock out Joshua Van, who is now the current champion of the flyweight division. And since Loner Kavanaugh is in the flyweight division, he could work his way up to a title shot. He just has to stay active and just keep winning by knockout, to be honest. And although we have only seen striking from him, I could see him beat 90% of the fighters in that division, let alone top 15 fighters. I hope we could see Loner Kavanaugh versus Joshua Van in late December of 2026. I know it sounds crazy and sounds fast, but getting a title shot in the flyweight division is so much easier than the other divisions, just because the flyweight division needs some big fighters, and what Loner Kavanaugh has in his arsenal could get him up to the top with his striking. Because if we also look back at Steve Erceg's UFC career, all he had to do was get on a 3-fight winning streak and he got a title shot against Pantoja. I understand that Pantoja did defeat a lot of the guys of the top 10 and that's what made Erceg get that spot. But I do think Leonard Kavanaugh, if he stays active and wins these next fights by knockout, he will climb the rankings pretty fast. And like I said, there's not a lot of big grapplers in the division, and his striking is already amazing. So if he can knock these guys out, I truly do think he could fight Joshua Van in December of 2026. And now with the number 4 spot, we have Esteban Ribovic. I do believe this is the year for Esteban to reach the top 10 in this lightweight division. I understand that he's been in the UFC since 2023, but he's 5-2 in the UFC since the Contender Series. I want to say this year, he will bring a lot of entertaining fights. And what I like about Esteban is that he's such a dog. He's a brawler, and he's really here to entertain the fans. His fight against McKinney showed how dangerous his kicks were and that knockout power he had. And the fight against Zell Huber at the Sphere for UFC Noche in 2024 was my fight of the year. And if you go back and look at his 4 fights, you will understand why I think he will crack that top 10. But his loss against Nasrat was honestly very disappointing for me, just because I do feel like Esteban is just a better fighter than Nasrat, but he managed to lose in a split decision. I think the fight that they should make for Esteban is Fares Ziam for that number 15 ranked spot in the lightweight division. I think this is the perfect matchup because they're both really good strikers, and let alone it would be such an entertaining fight for the fans. But we will see what happens next for Esteban in 2026. At the number 3 spot, I have Vinicius Oliveira. I've been watching Vinicius Oliveira since the Contender Series, so to see him ranked number 13 right now is crazy. Vinicius Oliveira is currently on a 6-fight winning streak, and his striking with his power is honestly next level. But Vinny is a huge bantamweight. Usually on fight day, you can see how massive he is compared to his opponent, which is a concern of mine just because he tends to get really tired as the fight goes on, but he always finds a way and manages to pull through with the win. The fight that really stood out to me was against Said Nurmagomedov in Saudi, where he showcased his takedown defense, which was really good. He managed to stop 8 takedowns out of the 9 takedown attempts. I could definitely see him get into that top 5 this year in the bantamweight division. And he has a scheduled fight this year in February against Mario Batista. And that fight within itself is going to be really fucking good. You have ranked number 9 Mario Batista versus ranked number 13 Vinicius Low Dog Oliveira. I will definitely be tuned into that fight. And like I said, he's going to crack the top 5 in the bantamweight division. So I could see Vinicius Oliveira knock out Mario Batista. Sounds crazy, but as the fight gets closer, I will later explain. But now, at the number 2, I have Joel Alvarez. Now, this is another UFC fighter who's been in the UFC for a while, and him specifically since 2019. He was 8-2 as a lightweight. He was struggling to make the weight, so he had to go up to welterweight. And in his welterweight debut, he fought against Vicente Luque, which Joel Alvarez pretty much dominated on the scorecards by 30-26 in all the judges' scorecards. I think that Joel's a really all-around fighter, and right now I think he's at his prime. I could definitely see him in the top 15 in the welterweight division this year. He has really good striking and amazing submission threat, with 17 wins by submission. But the thing is, the welterweight division is so stacked right now, but I could definitely see him fitting in perfectly. I could see Joel beat ranked number 9 Leon Edwards all the way to ranked number 15 D-Rod. But trust me, the competition would only get tougher. Anything from ranked 8 Usman all the way down to the champion Islam Makhachev. But like I said, Joel's in his prime in my opinion, and he could definitely make a name for himself in this division. So hopefully the UFC gives him a fight against D-Rod or even Colby Covington. I think that would be perfect for him. So as long as he stays active, I could see him have an amazing year. And now, for the number 1 spot, I have Kevin El Chino Vallejos. He's currently coming off a nasty knockout win against Giga Chikadze. I think that's how you say it, right? Kevin Vallejos is currently on a 6-fight winning streak, and 4 of them were in the UFC, including the Dana White Contender Series. Many of the fans compare him to Ilia Topuria just because of how good his striking is. I could definitely see Kevin get into the top 8 this year, maybe even top 5. Just because of how the featherweight division is right now. But in his last fights, he called out Cub Swanson, which honestly, I did not like at all. I think him being ranked number 13 now, he needs somebody like Gene Silva. I think that's the perfect matchup to make right now, just because they fought before, and Gene Silva is ranked number 10. And for a while, Kevin Vallejos has been calling out Gene Silva for that rematch, and I think it should happen, because if I'm being honest, the winner of that fight can fight a ranked number 3 opponent and possibly get a title shot, just because the featherweight division is in a very tricky situation that anything is possible. If Kevin Vallejos manages to defeat a guy like Gene Silva in a dominant fashion, he could possibly be fighting for the title shot this year. But that's a big if. But thank you for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.